Yeah, hi, Dr. Bill here.
Dr. Bill, thank you so much for the call, because if you haven't got a whole bunch of information about what's happening in the Gulf of Mexico, then there's something badly wrong. I figured that you must have.
The first thing is that I've been saying on Project Camelot and on my show that there's been increased problems with volcanism all over the world. What we're dealing with in the Gulf of Mexico is an oil volcano, and I've said I use that term for it because it's called a batholith, which is abiotic oil that's down 5 to 6 miles, and it's below that is a giant reserve of magma, which is liquid rock. The problem is that British Petroleum probably had access to classified information to be able to see this deposit because the ocean floor has been raising and lowering around the planet, including raising off the coast, the northeastern coast of Australia at the rate of 13 feet per day for the last few months. And the ocean floor changes means there's been a change in the pressures below this batholith by the movement of magma. That's why we're seeing more earthquakes and volcanoes all over the planet, including in Iceland. The British knew that this was going to be a giant reserve, and I can say this intuitively, the three largest easy reserves to get oil in the world at easily. The first one is one that people haven't yet got into. It's actually just directly off the coast, about 10, 20 miles, just directly east of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, which is south of this one. The next largest is this reserve, which is in the Gulf of Mexico that they tapped into. That's the second largest easy deep oil reserve on the planet. What's happened is this is abiotic, which means it's going to keep refilling. So there's three major dangers happening. And the first of these are ones that are already being measured. The first is that we're going to have the burping of lots of toxic gases, hydrogen sulfide, benzene, and volatile organic hydrocarbons. All of them are lethal. The worst of them probably is hydrogen sulfide. And the dosages of gases that are coming out are already well above the lethal dosage at the water level.
And that's already happening, isn't it, Dr. Bill?
That's already happening. Now, it means that those gases burp a large burp, and there's been cases occur in Africa and elsewhere where there were volcanic lakes where the gases will burp up, and then they'll just kill all the villagers within miles.
I think that happened in the Cameroon, didn't it, with carbon dioxide?
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And it wasn't just carbon dioxide, it was other gases mixed in with it. This one has a whole mixture of toxic gases that are particularly lethal. So that's the first major danger. Right now there are something like 79 exercises going on, state and federal, with a number of exercises by FEMA for mass evacuation from Brownsville, Texas to Pensacola, Florida. So they're getting ready with the last month. And they have been doing operational exercises on a massive oil spill even over the last several years. And all the places where those oil spill data have been posted on websites have been scrubbed in the last 60 days. So they removed all of the evidence that they were doing previous massive evacuation oil spill disasters. And that was the government, okay? So that's the first disaster is gas. The second, and we're going to have on the third hour today, Dr. Tim Ball, who is a climatologist from Vancouver, Canada, one of the top in the world. And his major danger, I'm going to call this talk the skin of the oceans talk, because what happens is when the oil comes up, especially with this Corexit dispersant, which disperses it, it actually puts an oil layer over the top of the water so your evaporative water losses drop. It also will increase the heat absorption of ultraviolet light and infrared light into the Gulf of Mexico, so it'll increase the number of hurricanes and major superstorms, and it will carry the Corexit and the oil inland when they do occur, but otherwise it may actually significantly alter the ability for moisture to enter the clouds that will then carry it inland to drop water over the crops and the cities in the southern United States, the northeast and the southeast United States. So in other words, we could have a decrease in rainfall that could be affected, and it also is very probably going to affect what's called the loop current escalator that brings warm water from the Gulf of Mexico to Europe to keep Europe from freezing over and turning into an ice age.
Is that the same thing as the Atlantic conveyor?
Same thing.
Right.
So the Atlantic conveyor is going to be affected. It's already poisoned, and we're in the danger now that if the Atlantic conveyor is affected negatively, it could tilt it toward an ice age. What's happening in the Gulf of Mexico is British Petroleum were beyond incompetent. They drilled an area in the depths where they knew the pressures were going to be somewhere up to 100,000 pounds per square inch, and it is at least 68,000 pounds per square inch. So they put the wrong pipes down. They put seawater instead of drill mud to try to cut corners. And apparently they modified the blowout preventer so there weren't even hydraulics on it to close the valve. So British Petroleum, instead of being seized, which it should be done, the company should be seized, we're dealing with a situation now where the people in the Gulf are in danger of not only their industry and their tourism destroyed and their jobs, but also the danger of a gas release, the danger that the Corexit, which is around 800 to 1 million gallons, they purchase all this dangerous material. And the EPA ordered the BP people to stop using it, and they told them they weren't going to stop. Well, all it does is disperse it. It doesn't fix it, and it actually could be more toxic than the oil because they can use fungi and bacteria that will actually bioconvert oil into organic waste. So if they simply seed this from planes over the area, they could have cleaned it up. And they also probably should have consulted the Russians to put nukes in the territory around the drill site because apparently the pipe broke about 1,000 feet below the seafloor, and now it's percolating up, and there's vents up to 5 to 20 miles away from the drill site that are actually coming up to the surface with these giant plumes. So they estimate conservatively 2.52 million gallons per day. And it increased 20% last week when they cut the top of the pipe where it was kinked and tried to put something to capture it. But they don't even have another super tanker ready to pick up the oil. So the second thing that was likely is we're going to have an effect on the water supply and the increased superstorm in the Gulf. But the most dangerous is the third thing that's likely to happen. And I have scientists that have contacted me now and others alerting me inside the government that both FEMA and Homeland Security are very concerned that their scientists are telling them there's a danger of a volcanic tsunami occurring. That means when the oil, at some point, whether it's 2 months or 10 months, but it's more likely to happen in the soon, like probably by the middle of the summer, that if enough oil comes out and seawater gets down there and it gets below the zone where the oil is and it makes contact with the magma, which is pushing up the oil, then we're likely to see a superheated steam, which is what drives all of the volcanoes from along the subduction zone, say the Ring of Fire, is all driven by steam. Most people don't realize the steam actually is the thing that drives it, and it's likely to cause a giant explosion with the change in the ocean floor, and a tsunami that they estimate could be between 80 and 200 feet high, going 400 to 600 miles an hour. They could carry 50 to 100 miles inland and could cross, because most of Florida is only 50 feet above sea level, it could cross the peninsula of Florida from the western coast of Florida to the east.
Can I stop you just a moment, Dr. Bill? If the oil is coming out at very high pressure, and I have sources that confirm those pressures that you've been talking about,
right,
I don't understand how the seawater could get down there, because surely what happens is if you fast forward this, then what happens is the pressure is gradually relieved. We don't know whether that's going to be months or decades, but then what happens when the pressure is relieved, then you get an equilibrium situation, and I don't understand how the seawater could actually ever get in the reservoir. Can you explain that to me?
What happens is that there's a period of that time when it's fluctuating around the equalization point, where the pressure coming out is equal by the 68 to 100,000 psi coming in, and the seawater will mix with the oil and get down into the area of the bottom of the batholith, which is actually a fractured air zone where there's a movement of magma below this giant oil deposit. So, in other words, it's like the subduction zone. We don't know how long it'll take for it to finally percolate, just like a steam kettle. What'll happen is this is what our scientists are telling us, is that the water at some point will get under this area and it will actually precipitate a steam-generated raising and then lower dropping of the seafloor that will create a tsunami.
This is very similar to what Richard Hoagland was reporting on Coast to Coast a couple of nights ago. You may already be familiar with that.
No, I didn't hear about that, but I've heard from other sources, right from my scientists that are contacting me, that we're in grave danger of three things: the gas release killing people, the changes in the climate there with superstorms, and then the third thing, which is the most dangerous of all, is a steam-related super tsunami that could occur. The other thing that we should realize is if it's not just the steam, there's hundreds of millions of tons at this particular area in the ocean of methane hydrates. Hundreds of millions of tons.
It's all frozen, isn't it?
It's all frozen. What happens is that it doesn't need oxygen because the actual chemistry down there, some of the things they're doing could ignite the methane hydrates and cause itself, without these other events like the volcanic tsunami thing, could cause all